श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानामालयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शारदा शारदाम्बोजवदनावदनाम्बुजे सर्वदा सर्वदास्माकं सन्निधिं क्रियात् भारती करुणापात्रं भारती पदभूषणं भारती पदमारूढं भारती तीर्थमाश्रये विद्याविनयसम्पन्नं वीतरागं विवेकिनं वन्दे वेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञं विदुशेखरभारतीम्. So today, thank you everybody for joining the call today, especially to those who are not in the class and have still taken their time to join. I sincerely thank you for your attendance. The topic of the day we are going to talk about is happiness versus peace. How do we understand the difference first? And how does Sandhyavandanam help in that process? That is the topic of discussion. The audience has got a mixture of young students, boys, as well as adults, both men and women. There may be some girls too. So because the age profile of the audience is wide, I am choosing to cater to the younger audience, which means many of the examples that I give might look as if I'm actually trying to cater to the younger ones in the audience. Please understand, and I hope you're okay with that. So for the adults especially, if anything looks too obvious, it's only because I'm just trying to cater to the boys or the girls in the audience. Thank you for your understanding. With that, let's get into understanding happiness versus peace first. So initially, it will look like happiness versus peace. I know what it is. There's not a lot of difference. But actually, when you get into the details, even for adults, you will see that happiness versus peace seems to be a continuum, and there are different stages in it. And it even for the adults, many of them are not obvious. Let's look at some example situations or contexts in life to see where does happiness lie and where does peace lie, to know the difference. So, you're young kid, you maybe did your homework on time, or you completed your chores at home. Mommy is happy, so mommy allowed you to play video games, or she cooked some yummy food for you, or daddy, mommy both are happy, so you all decided to go on a Disney vacation. All those things, what do they represent? Let's see. They represent tons of happiness. You go on the vacation, you come back, you had the yummy food, you played the video games with your friends, maybe on the net. You're really happy, a lot of happiness. But it is hard to say you got any kind of peace in that, right? You feel very happy, but then pretty soon the happiness also will fade away. That's a different point. But first thing to note is there was not much happiness in that. Let's look at the other end of the spectrum. Maybe you did some dhyanam, or maybe you did Sandhyavandanam, whatever the case may be. For now, you can take it from me, even if you did Sandhyavandanam, what is the net effect? There's a lot of peace in that. So it's quite possible that, in fact, almost everybody in the class is required to do Sandhyavandanam. So everybody is doing that. But whether you're really feeling the peace or not, it's questionable. For now, take my word for it. There is a lot of peace in that in the other end of the spectrum. But it doesn't stop there, the distinction. If you get into the details a little bit more, what you'll find, what about relaxing music? I listen to some relaxing music. What you find in that is there is some happiness. You got some happiness, but there is some peace also that came with it. So you got some peace and happiness in that process. And let's look at some more examples. I went to a spa, or I did some yoga. What happens then? I got some more happiness, but definitely more peace. Happiness might also come because I went out, I changed the environment. Music, I'm just listening it in the same environment. So I changed the environment. It was a lot more, happiness, but definitely a lot more peace I got out of it. But that also seems to be transient. It comes and goes. And you can even equate this to maybe, you went on a serene vacation, you went on a retreat, you went to a hill station somewhere, you are relaxing by yourself. Definitely at that moment, you feel peaceful, but it doesn't seem to be long lasting. It fades off. So compared to the Disney vacation, when you're doing a retreat or you went to a hill station, definitely there was more peace, but still it quickly fades off. What about charity, volunteering? That's an interesting one, which even adults cannot comprehend fully. At the outset, everybody seems to think, oh, life is fulfilling. If I did charity and volunteering, that's it. That's the ultimate. I've got all of it, whatever I needed. But if you really look at what emotions charity and volunteering might evoke, there is certainly a lot of fulfillment, and that gives you a lot of happiness. So you can see much more than playing video games or eating yummy food or having a Disney vacation. Doing charity or volunteering gives much more fulfillment, so the happiness content is much higher. But if you look at the peace part of it, it's still not that much. So you can now see in the continuum, even for adults, there is a lot of confusion in our lives to see where does happiness really lie and where does peace really lie. Obviously, the one seeking peace is shifting right, going to the right side of the equation to see where do I find that dhyanam, where do I do that sandhya. If I can't do sandhya, what can I do? What else is there? What are the options available? That is where the person is going towards. So that's the first thing that I want to clearly make people aware, that the difference between happiness and peace, it's subtle, but there is a lot more involved in it. And we have to understand the nuances in all of these. Having understood this, now I've made a statement to you that Sandhyavandanam is definitely going to give you this much peace. I have to substantiate that. Even practitioners of Sandhyavandanam in our class probably may not agree with me fully, just simply because they haven't experienced it. So from the perspective of one who has experienced it, I have to justify or I have to show how that claim is true. Let's see that. So the idea is this piece, if you really look at what is inside it, another major difference what you will find with everything else on the left compared to this one on the right, it also has bliss in it. When you combine the peace and the bliss, you literally get ananda. So that this peace plus bliss giving you the ananda, it's definitely not possible in any of the other combinations we have looked at. Even if it is charity, you do a lot of charity, you do a lot of volunteering, you have a very fulfilling life, you do a lot of spa, yoga, all of these put together, still that ananda is harder to experience. So how do we experience that, and how does Sandhyavandanam help? Let's look at that in a little bit more detail. The first thing to note is this peace and bliss that I talked about. Kundalini Yoga has a big role to play in that. But the first thing to understand is the so-called Kundalini Yoga is not a separate discipline in Hindu scriptures, as people talk about it in the modern days. Kundalini Yoga doesn't even exist as a separate discipline in our scriptures. But the other thing to note is most aspects of Vedas, our rituals, and including Sandhyavandanam, or other hymns like, Lalita Sahasranamam, any of those, if you see, they all incorporate the concept of Kundalini Yoga, all of that, they're built into it. So it's part and parcel of many of our scriptures. It doesn't stand on its own. So what is really Kundalini Yoga? We will look at that in a little bit more detail. But for now, all I want you to understand is it represents the rise of conscious energy. This conscious energy is nothing but electromagnetic energy, which primarily manifests itself in the form of electricity inside your body through your nervous system, and that energy rises in your body from the bottom to the top. In general, that's what this Kundalini Yoga is all about. But how is it described in our scriptures? It is described through what is called Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga, Ashta means 8, Anga means parts, Ashtanga Yoga means there are 8 parts to it. So this Ashtanga Yoga was conceived and described in detail by sage Patanjali, and he wrote what are called Patanjali Sutras. They're all covered in that. That Ashtanga Yoga goes into detail about Kundalini, everything, your lifestyle, so many other aspects of it. And that's what, in general, we call as Kundalini Yoga. Now, how does, next question that comes is, what is the connection between Kundalini Yoga and Sandhyavandanam? That's a natural question anybody would ask. Like I said earlier, our rituals, of which Sandhyavandanam is one, it incorporates many of the aspects of Kundalini Yoga already. What are they? Let's see. The number one aspect out of these 8 aspects, to achieve that peace that I talked earlier in the previous slide, the peace plus bliss equals Ananda. To achieve that, there are 2 major aspects that are required, which are already part of Sandhyavandanam, and that is pranayamam and dhyanam. So what does pranayamam mean? Pranayamam means you are able to hold your breath and control it. So when you inhale, control, hold your breath and exhale, and when you practice that rhythm and when you practice that control, that is pranayama. Dhyanam means what? You're doing Gayatri Japam maybe as part of the Sandhyavandanam. At that time, you're trying to get rid of all your thoughts. All you're thinking about is just the Gayatri Mantra. And inside your head, all that is going on is only the Gayatri Mantra and nothing else. You're not thinking about the Green Bay Packers versus Cowboys game today. You're not worried about the Mavericks game. You're not worried about the Rangers, game. None of that. You're not worried about what am I going to do with the homework tomorrow. Monday is due. I still have about 30% left in that. I haven't done my homework. None of those are on your mind. It's actually dinner time. I didn't even have a snack. I'm already hungry. None of that is bothering you. You're only focused on your japam or your goal. That is dhyana. Okay. So these 2 are already there in Sandhyavandanam. Now, let's look at the pranayama aspect in particular. And one challenge that I do see with all of us, most of us, we don't do the pranayama properly. Some people who have learned yoga, they may not even know anything about Sandhyavandanam. They probably practice the pranayama properly because they have been taught this is how you do breathing exercises. But when we learn Sandhyavandanam as a ritual, the problem is we just blindly do it. You can even see people just putting their finger here, nothing, no breath, nothing is happening. They're just chanting the mantra. That is not pranayama. Pranayama actually means you got to be able to close your nostril, inhale, and then you're going to hold. So now you're holding the breath. And in fact, when you're holding the breath, obviously you can't talk, which means that mantra, you can't even say it loud. You're going to silently saying it. Om bu, whatever that mantra you've been taught, you're going to say it silently until the end of the mantra. You hold the breath, and then you're going to release it through the other nostril. That is what is called a proper pranayama. So if you do a proper pranayama that way, then Sandhyavandanam already includes this aspect. And in fact, Sandhyavandanam, if you see, it asks you to do at least 10 pranayamams, not 1 or 2, at least 10. And you have to do 3 times Sandhya a day, which means you're doing 30 pranayamams a day. So it's already built into your lifestyle. As long as you follow that, you're doing it 30 times. This holding, inhaling, holding, releasing. You're doing it 30 times. So pranayamam is already there. 3 times a day you're doing Gayatri Japam. So Dhyanam is also there. I've told all of you at least do 108 Gayatri every time. Only in cases when you don't have time, 232 I've said, which means you're at least doing, if you follow my words, 324 Gayatris every day. You're already doing that. So in one day, there is plenty of pranayama and dhyanam built into it already. What is missing? Asanas. There are elements of asanas in Sandhyavandanam already, but still, it's not to the point where one can really say, I practiced asanas. It's very hard to say, I did Sandhyavandanam, but I also did asanas automatically in that. It's not quite there. So asanas may be one piece that somebody may have to learn if they really want to incorporate this entire aspect of Kundalini Yoga within Sandhyavandanam. So as long as somebody, and what asanas, there are so many of them that are in the play for yoga, all of them don't matter. What matters is only those asanas that are focusing on the spine manipulation. How do you move your spine back and forth, bend it, stretch it, extend it, bend it forward, bend it backward. Those are the kind of asanas that matter. So if somebody is able to do really proper pranayamam, proper dhyanam, and adds the basic regimen of asanas that help you work on your spine, you've pretty much got all the basics for Kundalini Yoga. There are other aspects that are still missing. Ashtanga Yoga talks about yama, niyama, so many other things. Those are all to do with your lifestyle and other things. We don't need to get into those details. Just the mechanics of it, if you look at it, there are two of it that's already there in Sandhya. You just add one more called asanas. And if you just add these three, the effect is amazing. Now, what do I mean by the effect is amazing? You can really feel the rise of this kundalini or this electromagnetic, the conscious energy in your body from the bottom to the top. I'm saying that, but even in my class, clearly many of the people will say, but I don't feel that. I've been doing Sandhyavandanam for the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I don't feel anything going up and down. I'm just sitting where I am, no change. I'm not seeing anything. It's quite natural that you feel that way. All I would say is, consider just two factors. Number one, regardless of age, how good have you been doing your, this aspect of, your, I'm going to take this one. Yeah. Your pranayamam or your dhyanam. How good have you been at it? How careful have you been to really do the pranayamam and the dhyanam properly? You will find that you have been superficial about it, at least many of them, those who haven't experienced it. That's one part. And you may or may not have added asanas. Let's leave that aside. The second thing is, let's look at how Sandhyavandanam is practiced in our culture. Typically, we advise by the age of 7, we put a boy, Punal and all that. So Upanayanam is done at the age of 7, if you strictly follow the discipline. And from the age of 7, let's assume a boy, maybe an idealistic boy, who does this Sandhyavandanam thrice a day, does this pranayamam properly, does the dhyanam properly, and the boy is now 20, 21 years old. That means this boy has been doing it for how many? Almost 14 years. So the boy is coming out of college, but has been doing it for 14 years. That kind of a person is very different to us. Even if you take, of course, I'm not even going to somebody studying Vedas in a Gurukulam or Veda Parashala. We are all learning Vedas part-time, but they are learning Vedas full-time. If you look at those people, definitely they would have put a lot of emphasis on all these three items, pranayamam, dhyanam, as well as asanas. So for those people, if you ask them, definitely they will say, I'm able to feel, something going up and down. I'm able to feel it. So if we are not able to feel it, it's only because we haven't practiced the right way or we haven't practiced it long enough. But if we were to do those two, certainly we would be able to feel it as well. Now, we have about 6 more minutes or so. What I want to do is, probably I will stop here. I will just recap what we talked about today. Certainly, we talked about happiness versus peace. We gave a lot of examples on where you get a plenty of happiness. We gave a lot of examples where you get some happiness, some peace. We even gave examples for the adults from what they do as they start making more money and they wonder what's the purpose in my life and all that, and they do a lot of these. Even for those adults, what does it mean in terms of happiness versus peace? And we showed the ultimate aspect, which is the dhyanam, where there is a lot more peace to be experienced. We covered that part. We also covered what is the difference between Sandhyavandanam versus Kundalini Yoga. How does it include Kundalini Yoga? What is Ashtanga Yoga? What are the key aspects of it? The 3 aspects that are at least essential. All those we saw that as well. With that, I just want to stop here. And before I take questions, I want to probably, make just one more observation. What if somebody says, I can't even do Sandhya? Maybe I'm a lady, or maybe, nobody has given me Upanayanam yet. Then what am I going to do? Are you telling me none of this is possible for me? All this is worthless for me? Is that what you're telling me? No, not at all. Sandhya is a ritual prescribed for those who want to go through the process. And naturally, for those who want to go through the process, and if they do it right, like I said earlier, they will start at the age of 7 or so, and it's sort of built into their lifestyle. It's very hard, it's not easy. I have that struggle with my own students, because I've dropped so many students out of my class because they couldn't do Sandhya even once a day. So many of them have had to drop out. So I'm not joking. I know the experience. I have cases where father stayed, son had to drop out, son stayed, father had to drop out, all those combinations. So even within a family, one person can do, one person cannot do. So it's not easy. I'm not joking. I've been through all of those. So for those who are able to go through that regime, the commitment and everything, certainly it comes naturally. All they have to do is do it properly and add the asanas part of it. But what about those who can't even do it? It doesn't mean all this is theoretical or meaningless for them. Certainly anybody can close their eyes and do dhyanam. And when you're doing your dhyanam, you can chant anything. Whatever you know, whatever you have been taught, you can certainly chant. But if you do that same chanting with those aspects in mind, maybe you do some pranayamam first, maybe you do some breathing exercises, and then maybe you do some asanas. The order will also change. I didn't mention that so far. You do pranayamam first, then asanas, then dhyanam. Dhyanam comes in the end. And some people mix up the orders. I see some people doing asanas and then pranayamam. That is wrong. So you do pranayamam, then asanas, and then dhyanam. So somebody can still do that without knowing Sandhyavandanam. Will they get the benefit? Absolutely, 100%. So this aspect of Kundalini or conscious energy rising up and down is the same for all human beings. It is no different whether you are a man or a woman, girl or a boy, a Hindu or a non-Hindu, doesn't matter. It is there. It is there in everybody. The question is whether anybody is willing to commit to it and do it regularly. Does it happen overnight? No, it takes a long time. That is why even if you see the Sandhyavandanam ritual, it starts so young at the age of 7. And if somebody has kept up with it for 13, 14 years, you can see the result yourself. With that, I'll stop here the first part, and hopefully for the next part of the lecture,